I have a sense of deja vu. We're all very sorry that Jamie couldn't travel for health reasons. I'm particularly sorry because I have to stand in his place and try to deliver his presentation. So I'll do my best. Hopefully you'll give me a little bit of recognition that I don't know the material as well as Jamie does. I wanted to start with a question. Is there anyone in the room that finds standards exciting? Maybe Harry? I appreciate that the standards isn't necessarily the most exciting part of the potential opportunity we have. It's not the amazing visualizations, the comprehensive models that we develop, the benefits that we unlock, but it's really absolutely center and necessary part of a successful transformation and the introduction of a new way of working with BIM. And I wanted to share a little bit about the journey we went on with our development of standards and try to explain the lessons we learned from that and hopefully the advantage that Plan BIM has in not having to repeat some of the mistakes that we made and get it right first time. I mentioned in my last presentation that our industry is very fragmented. 300,000 companies, and the average number of employees in those companies is less than 10. All of those companies will have their own ways of working, their own processes, their own standards, their own technologies. And our Level 2 BIM methodology is built around the idea of collaboration. And that's really hard to do on large, complex projects, even small, complex projects, where you have many, many different companies coming together for a temporary period of time and trying to work together if they are all working in a different way, if they all use a language that is slightly different from everybody else. It's really difficult to understand how your roles and responsibilities align with everybody else's roles and responsibilities if the way that you define what you do is slightly different. So we realized very quickly that it was absolutely essential that we developed a common language and a common approach. And that doesn't mean that our organizations can't innovate. It doesn't mean that we can't still have creativity. But it provides a framework, a foundation, so that when we are working in a much more collaborative way, we can do that with the understanding and knowledge. Then when we refer to a specific term, a specific idea, or a specific stage in our project, that we're describing the same thing as the people we're working with from other companies. So one of the first things that we started with was a common definition of the different stages of our projects. We developed what we call a plan of work, which sets out the 8 stages, 0 through 7. So that if a client describes that they need certain information for concept design, and an architect delivers something at that stage, they know what concept design is. We have a document that describes the expectations, the deliverables, and the responsibilities at that stage of the project. It's a common language that everybody understands. So we developed standards that would align to these different stages of the project. And these are the 3 of the main standards that we have. The Green Book describes the way that we will manage information during design and construction of our projects. The standard in the middle is how we will manage effectively the handover of information from the design and construction team into the operation of the building or asset. And the orange standard sets out how we will manage information through the operational life of that building or asset. And it provides us that guidance, that those standard processes for each of those stages of the life of our assets and buildings. So the green one is not very intuitively called PAS 1192 Part 2. It's their standard name. But it does give that specific guidance on the process and also the roles and responsibilities associated with that process. This is one of the diagrams from that green book. I don't expect everybody to immediately understand what is quite a complex diagram, but I'll try to explain some of the main principles of it. And actually, this is the heart of that PAS 1192 standard. The blue part of the diagram around the outside is the management process. It describes the way we will define requirements for information, the way that plans will be developed for the delivery of that information, how we will select suppliers to deliver our projects and be responsible for the delivery of that information. And then at the bottom of that blue process is the management of the delivery of the project. In the center with the green, we have the different stages of the project, as I showed you in the previous slides. And we have this idea of information growing and developing through the life of the project. Three main types of information. Documents, probably the most common form of information you have today. Models, geometric models. And non-graphic data, typically delivered in a format like a spreadsheet that will describe the attributes of the building or asset that we're developing. And that information will mature through the life of the project. And that information is being developed for a particular purpose. And in the bottom, with the red diamonds at the bottom of the diagram, are key decisions that need to be taken in most projects. For those decisions to be taken in a timely manner, quickly, and for those decisions to be taken with confidence that it's the right decision, you need good information. And if we can specify the right information to be delivered at that time, then we can have confidence that we can make those decisions quickly and know that we're making the right decisions. I've already mentioned that we defined a standard that helps ensure that the requirements for the operation of the building are considered at an early stage, and that information is effectively transferred from the design and construction team to the operators of the building and asset. I think typically in the past, we would start the operation of a building with the operations team going around and surveying the building and collecting all of the information again that may or may not have been collected during design and construction. So we're hoping to eliminate a costly and time-consuming process to ensure that that information is transferred directly to the operations team during handover. And we've heard that the cost of operating an asset and the time that an asset is in life is much greater than the time and cost of the design and construction of that asset. So we want to be sure that we have an effective process to maintain high quality information about that asset or building through its entire life, so we can make good decision making, good decisions during the life of the asset. In fact, we even have a case study on the BIM Task Group website in the UK on the efficiency of changing a light bulb, where this process has been followed, versus a traditional building where that information hasn't been collected. To give this a bit more detail, I'll talk a little bit about a case study from one of our government departments, the Ministry of Justice. The Ministry of Justice is responsible for building our courts and our prisons. Jamie worked very closely with the Ministry of Justice. My level of knowledge is not as high as his, so I'll probably also include some examples from some of those departments I've worked more closely with, such as defense, education, and health. It's interesting when I look at this slide, and it reminds me very much of the material that Naib has just presented. It almost takes me back to 2013 and the workshops that we ran with government departments to understand their business processes, to understand the way they managed projects. And we got a really high quality deliverable at the end of it. We got these very detailed process maps to understand how projects were managed within departments. But it achieved a lot more than that. We've heard from a number of presentations, and Jamie's video is the most recent example, that one of the keys to success of a BIM transformation is engaging with people. Challenge and the biggest complexity that I think we've experienced in the last 5 years is a people challenge. And there are definitely technical challenges to be solved, but the people challenge and the cultural change, the transformation, bringing everybody on that journey of change with you, I think is the biggest challenge we have. And by sitting down in a workshop with representatives of the ministries and the government departments, we were able to make those people a part of the change. We weren't making change to them, we were making change with them. They started to take ownership of the transformation, and that transformation will be much more successful as a result of that. We also found, as we went through the processes, not necessarily in the Ministry of Justice, but in some of the other departments, 2 other findings. The first one is, most of them had their processes already documented. They had detailed documents about their business processes. But a lot of the time we would find that the common practice in reality was nothing like what the documentation said. People would find ways of working more efficiently personally, and they would all be working in a different way, different to the way that the documents were defined. And this was actually a surprise to some of the departments, that people weren't following the instructions. The other thing that we found is that the processes that they were operating were inefficient. Even putting BIM to one side, they found activities in their processes that weren't adding value and they were taking a lot of time. So they took those out, or they made them more efficient. So we actually saw benefits coming out from BIM that had nothing to do with BIM. But the situation that you typically find, and I'm sure Chile is the same as the UK, everybody is so busy doing their day-to-day job that they never take the opportunity to take a step back, reflect on how they work, and realize that there might be a better way to do things. And BIM has created that opportunity through these workshops and through the workshops that Naya presented earlier, for people to have that chance to reflect and realize that there might be a better way to do it, even if that isn't purely based on BIM. So we already started to drive benefits during these conversations, both with the level of engagement, the interest and the ownership of change within the departments, as well as those short-term process changes that we were able to introduce. And this is the process map for the Ministry of Justice. And in simple terms, the grey boxes at the top are the different tasks that people have to perform. We've got the red diamonds again, those key decision points where the project has to be paused. We have to check that we're in a good situation to proceed to the next stage of the project. In one of the departments that I work with, each of those decisions on average would take 90 days. And that particular department had 4 decisions to make on every project. So 1 year was being added to the life of every project they ran, purely for the opportunity to make a decision at those different stages. Their aim through the introduction of BIM was to reduce that decision time to 30 days for those 4 decision points, taking 8 months off the life of every project that they run. So without doing anything else around model-based design or anything like that, because they had the right information at the right time, they had confidence in the quality of the information, they would make decisions to proceed to the next stage of the project much quicker. And there's a lot of detail in those standards. I suspect there are many people in the UK that still haven't read those standards, even those that tell us that they're already following them. But for me, it really breaks down into asking these key questions regarding our projects and assets. And I think one of the most important questions is, why is the information required? BIM is about the creation, management, and use of information. And one of the lessons that we had from some of our early projects, particularly if the information requirements are not clearly defined, is that the suppliers would produce all of the information, all of the detail about all of the information possible, all of the individual elements of all of the assets in a building, even if that information had no purpose or value. For BIM, and somebody had to create that information and manage that information, and creating and managing that information has a cost. And a cost with no benefit isn't efficient. So one of the very clear things that we need to be able to do with a successful BIM implementation is to be very clear about why we need information. And also when the information is required. Now, if a client says, I need information about the size of the building that will be constructed at concept design stage, because we've defined consistent stages for our processes and everybody understands what they mean, everybody can understand when in the project that information will be required. And that will be typically just tied to the red diamonds that I showed you earlier, to those key decision points. Typically, there will be a project board that meets, that will review a checklist of questions that need to be answered, and if the project answers positively to those questions, they can proceed to the next stage. Those questions are probably a good indication of the information that might be needed in order to be able to make a good decision at that stage of the project. Clearly, we need to understand what information is required. More than that, it's not just the type of information, but it's the level of detail that we require. The level of detail that we would need for the door in this room at the concept stage of a project, probably nothing at all. But as we get to construction and the technical design, we will start to look at the specific manufacturer, the specification, if it has to be fire resistant and the rating of that door. We would attach a lot more information at that stage. But we would create a lot of additional effort if we put that information into the model too early in the process, particularly if during the early stages of the design we decided that door wasn't even necessary there. So by developing what information is required and what level of detail is required, we can ensure that the effort that our suppliers put into developing this solution is as efficient as possible, and only providing information that has value or purpose. We also want to be clear on who is responsible for preparing the information and who is responsible for managing the quality of that information. So we have clearly defined roles and responsibilities to ensure that happens. And then we want to know very clearly how that information will be delivered. What format will that be delivered in? Will it be delivered through some form of electronic transfer? And I actually think, to break it down really, really simply, if we're exploring those questions, firstly as a client, to think about our requirements at the beginning of a project or the life of an asset. And we can articulate our requirements in the form of responding to these questions, and that we can provide that to an industry that is able to respond with a plan that describes how they will satisfy those requirements. I think that's a good part of the journey complete. Now, if we can embed that within documents that everybody can respond to and follow, such as standards, then it makes it much more consistent and much more official. And there are presentations out there, and many of my UK colleagues will provide really, really detailed complex technical presentations about what BIM is. And I'm not a technical person. But I think sometimes, although we need to explore those technicalities, although we have to solve those technical problems, sometimes we have to take it back to something that's a lot more simple and appreciate why we're actually doing this in the first place. We want to improve efficiency, absolutely. And technology can help us improve efficiency. But the prize beyond efficiency is effectiveness. We don't just want to do things right. We want to make sure we do the right things. And if we have the right information, we can make good decisions. We've talked about, from an efficiency perspective, our goal to achieve 15, 20% efficiency savings in our design and construction projects. Actually, the most effective saving we can achieve is realizing that's the wrong project to do in the first place. If we're managing our information at a whole ministry level, if we're managing our information at a whole estate level, we can make much more strategic decisions, not just during the life of a project, but even before a project begins. So we aren't just talking about efficiency. Efficiency is absolutely critical. It's an absolutely important goal for what we achieve. But our goal is a better outcome, not just in financial savings, but in terms of environmental savings as well. We talked a lot about waste earlier, but also about social outcomes as well. I think the thing for me that illustrated that from Adam's presentation earlier is the UK government's announcement that because of the introduction of BIM and other aspects of our government construction strategy, we are now able to build 7 schools in the UK for the price of 5. And the environments that we provide for our young people to learn and become our professionals, our adults of the future, is much more conducive to higher quality of education as well. Our healthcare environments allow people to recover more quickly. We build a better society as well. So I may have started with a rather flippant question about whether standards are exciting. But if it provides us with the basis, with the possibility of enabling that kind of transformation, then even if they're not exciting, I'd say they were worth it. Thank you.